Part 1. For over 200 years, Earth had been quiet. Not the kind of quiet that meant peace or rest, but the kind that made others wonder if anyone was still home. The Galactic Concord, a group of many different spacefaring civilizations, met every 50 years to talk about trade, laws, and how to keep the stars safe for everyone. Most species sent ambassadors, shared news, and argued politely over who got to mine which asteroids. Earth had shown up only once, long ago, during the very first meeting. After that, nothing. No messages, no ships, no replies to hails. Just silence. At first, the other species thought humans were shy. Then they thought maybe Earth had fallen into war or disease. Some even whispered that humanity had destroyed itself, as so many young civilizations did when they reached for the stars too fast. Over time, Earth became a ghost in the records, listed in old archives, mentioned in history lessons, but never seen. The Concord moved on. They built new stations, signed new treaties, and forgot about the small blue planet tucked away in a quiet corner of the Milky Way. On the Concord diplomatic cruiser, Varelian Dawn, Envoy Cale Voss sat in his quarters reviewing the agenda for the upcoming summit. His species, the Varelians, were tall and slender, with smooth gray skin and eyes that glowed faintly in low light. Kyle had served the Concord for 40 cycles and had never once met a human. He didn't expect to now. As he scrolled through the list of attending members, he paused at the entry for Sol 3, Earth's official designation. The status read non-responsive. No delegation expected. He sighed and tapped the screen to archive it. Another empty chair. Another name to ignore. The summit would be held at Helios Prime, a massive space station orbiting a calm white dwarf star. It was neutral ground, built by joint effort centuries ago and considered one of the safest places in known space. Delegates from dozens of worlds would gather there, some in shimmering robes, others in armored suits, a few even floating in nutrient tanks. They would eat strange foods, debate strange laws, and pretend to trust one another. Earth would not be among them, again. But while the galaxy assumed humanity had vanished, Earth had not been idle. Far from it. Hidden behind the moons of Jupiter and wrapped in layers of encrypted signals, Earth had spent the last 2 centuries doing something no one expected. Preparing. After the resource wars of the late 21st century, when nations nearly tore the planet apart fighting over water, energy, and land, humanity had finally learned a hard lesson. They could not afford division if they wanted to survive among the stars. Slowly, painfully, the world came together. Old borders faded. Old hatreds cooled. A new global council formed, not perfect but functional. And with peace on the ground, minds turned upward. Scientists, engineers, and dreamers worked in secret. Not because they feared the galaxy, but because they respected it. They had listened to every Concord broadcast they could intercept. They heard how quickly alliances shifted, how easily weaker species were pushed aside, how often promises were broken. Earth would not beg for a seat at the table. They would earn it, or build their own. In underground labs beneath the Rocky Mountains, physicists like Dr. Lena Ortiz tested new kinds of engines that bent space instead of fighting it. On orbital platforms near Mars, shipwrights assembled hulls from alloys that could heal small cracks on their own. In the dark between Neptune and the Kuiper Belt, AI-guided factories built weapons that didn't just destroy. They disabled, confused, or shielded. Everything was designed for one purpose: to ensure that if Earth ever spoke again, the galaxy would listen. No one on Earth knew the full scope of the project. Only a few leaders, military officers, and top scientists had access to the complete plan. Most citizens went about their lives, growing food in vertical farms, teaching in digital classrooms, exploring the oceans or the moon for fun. But they all knew something was happening. They saw the extra power drawn from fusion plants. They noticed the quiet disappearances of engineers and pilots. They felt the weight of a shared secret. Captain Daniel Briggs was one of those who knew everything. A former naval officer from the Pacific Coast, he had spent 30 years helping design Earth's new fleet. He wasn't flashy. He didn't give speeches, but he understood war and he understood silence. "We don't hide because we're weak," he once told a young recruit. "We hide because we're smart. And when we stop hiding, it won't be to ask nicely." Back on the Varelian Dawn, Cale finished his report and stood to stretch. Through his viewport, he watched distant stars blink in the endless dark. He thought about Earth for a moment. Not with suspicion, but with a kind of sad curiosity. "What happened to you?" he murmured. He assumed the answer was tragedy. He had no idea it was strategy. Meanwhile, deep in the Sol system, final checks were being run on 1,000 warships. Their hulls were painted matte black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Their engines hummed at low power, ready to roar. Their crews, men and women from every continent, stood at their stations, calm and focused. They had trained for this moment their whole lives, even if they hadn't known it. Earth had skipped every meeting. Not out of disrespect, not out of fear, but because they were building something worth showing up with. And soon, very soon, the galaxy would see what 2 centuries of silence could produce. For now, though, the stars remained quiet. The Concord prepared for another routine summit. And Earth waited, patient, ready, and no longer alone. Part 2. After the resource wars ended, Earth was tired. Not just the kind of tired that comes from a long day, but the deep, heavy tired that settles in bones and cities and hearts. The wars had not been about land or pride, they had been about survival. Water ran low. Energy grids failed. Food grew scarce. Nations turned on each other. And for a while it looked like humanity would burn itself out before it ever reached the stars. But then something changed. Not all at once, but slowly, like dawn after a long night. People began to talk instead of fight. Old enemies shared tech. Old borders blurred. And from that broken world, a new idea took root. If humans wanted to live among the stars, they first had to learn to live with each other. That idea became the Global Unity Accord. It wasn't perfect. Some countries still argued. Some leaders still lied. But for the first time in history, Earth acted as one voice when it came to space. And that voice chose silence. Not because they had nothing to say, but because they needed time to listen. While the rest of the galaxy held meetings and signed treaties, Earth watched. Hidden satellites disguised as space junk drifted near the edges of known systems. They recorded every conquered broadcast, every trade deal, every whispered threat. Back on Earth, teams of linguists and analysts studied alien speech patterns, customs, and laws. They learned how the Zenthar hegemony used honor duels to settle disputes, how the Varelians valued patience over speed, how the Krell Collective made decisions by consensus, not command. Nothing was wasted. Every piece of data was filed, studied, and used, but listening wasn't enough. Earth needed strength, real strength. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that doesn't have to. In the quiet years, humanity turned its greatest minds inward. Factories that once built cars and phones now built fusion cores and quantum processors. Schools that taught history and math added courses in xenolinguistics and zero-gravity engineering. Children grew up knowing that one day they might stand on a bridge of a starship, not as explorers, but as guardians. Deep beneath the ice of Europa, engineers tested new shield systems that could bend energy beams like water around a stone. On the far side of the moon, where no telescope from Earth could see, shipyards grew like forests of steel and light. Robots welded hulls while humans oversaw the work, their faces lit by the glow of control panels. No logos, no flags, just function. Every ship was built to be fast, tough, and smart. They didn't need names, only numbers. And they were ready long before anyone outside Earth knew they existed. At the heart of it all was Captain Daniel Briggs. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a scientist. He was a sailor, a man who understood that in space, as on the sea, preparation meant survival. He had lost friends in the resource wars. He had seen cities fall. That was why he believed in silence. Words are cheap, he often said. Steel isn't. Briggs worked closely with Dr. Lena Ortiz, a physicist from New Mexico who had once dreamed of studying black holes. Instead, she spent her life making engines that could slip through space like a knife through silk. Her breakthrough, called the slipstream drive, let ships travel faster than light without tearing themselves apart. It wasn't magic. It was math tested over and over until it worked. And when it did, Earth's fleet could go anywhere, anytime, without warning. Ortiz never sought fame. She didn't care about medals or titles. She cared about results. If we're going to show up, she told Briggs once, we better not be late. The world governments agreed on one rule: no contact until Earth was ready. Not even a signal. Not even a probe. The risk was too great. If the galaxy knew Earth was building a fleet, they might see it as a threat. And threats get crushed, especially by older, stronger civilizations. So Earth stayed dark. Their colonies on Mars and Titan pulled back, dismantled their comms arrays, and went radio silent. Trade ships stopped flying. Research outposts shut down. To the outside universe, humanity had vanished. But inside the Sol system, life hummed with quiet purpose. Solar collectors floated near Mercury, beaming clean energy to every corner of human space. Asteroid miners brought back rare metals that fed the shipyards. AI systems managed logistics so well that food, fuel, and parts moved like blood through a body, smooth, steady, unseen. Most people on Earth never saw a warship. They lived in green cities, walked under clean skies, and raised families in peace. But they knew. They felt it in the extra taxes, the longer work shifts, the occasional blackout when power was rerouted to the outer system. They didn't complain. They remembered the wars. They knew what silence had bought them, time. And time had bought them strength. Admiral Carol Hayes oversaw the final stages of the fleet's readiness. She had started her career flying drones over the Pacific, back when oceans were still rising. Now she commanded the largest military force Earth had ever built. She was calm, sharp, and fair. She didn't believe in revenge. She believed in deterrence. "We don't want to fight," she told her officers. "But if we do, it ends fast." Training exercises happened in the void beyond Pluto. Ships moved in perfect formation, testing weapons, shields, and tactics. They practiced disabling enemy vessels without killing crews. They learned how to jam signals, fake retreats, and strike from blind spots. Everything was recorded, reviewed, and improved. Mistakes were fixed before they could become failures, and through it all, Earth waited. They watched the conquered meet again and again. They saw species rise and fall. They saw treaties signed and broken. They saw the galaxy's true nature, not evil but careless. The strong did as they pleased. The weak disappeared. Earth would not be weak. The final decision came not from fear but from timing. The next Concord summit was approaching. Helios Prime would be full of diplomats, spies, and soldiers. It was the perfect moment. Not too soon, not too late. Just right. Briggs stood on the observation deck of the lead ship watching Jupiter's storm swirl below. Ortiz joined him, holding a data pad with final engine checks. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded. "They've ignored us long enough." Back on Earth, children played in parks under trees that had been planted after the wars. Farmers harvested crops in domes lit by artificial suns. Artists painted murals of starships they'd never seen. None of them knew the fleet was about to move. But they would soon. For 200 years, Earth had been silent. Not because they had nothing to say, but because they were building the voice to say it with power. And now that voice was ready to speak. Part 3. The Concord Summit at Helios Prime began like every other. Delegates arrived in sleek shuttles, their hulls polished to a shine, their banners fluttering in the station's artificial breeze. Music played in the grand hall, soft harmonic tones designed to calm nerves and encourage cooperation. Vendors sold exotic snacks. Diplomats exchanged polite greetings. No one expected anything unusual. Earth's empty seat was already covered with a neutral gray cloth, as it had been for 2 centuries. Life went on. Cale Voss stood near the central podium reviewing his notes on asteroid mining rights. He wore the traditional Varelian robe, deep blue with silver thread, and his long fingers tapped lightly against his data slate. Around him, species from across the galaxy milled about. The insect-like Grith chittered in low tones. The amphibious Mullins floated in water-filled suits. Even representatives from the proud Zenthar hegemony were present, their scaled armor gleaming under the station lights. Everything felt normal, predictable, safe. Then the alarm sounded. At first, no one reacted. False alarms happened often at Helios Prime. Sensor glitches, solar flares, stray comets. But this was different. The station's main display lit up with red warnings. 1,000 massive energy signatures had just dropped out of slipstream at the edge of the system. No warning, no approach pattern. Just sudden, overwhelming presence. Panic spread fast. Delegates turned toward the viewports. Security teams rushed to their posts. The Zenthar envoy barked orders into his comm, his tail stiff with tension. Kyle's heart pounded as he stared at the screen. The readings made no sense. Nothing in known space could produce that many warships at once, except maybe the old Krell armadas, and they hadn't been seen in generations. Then came the transmission. It cut through all channels, clean and clear with no distortion. A human voice, calm, firm, female, spoke in Galactic Standard, the common tongue of the conquered. This is Earth Defense Command. We request immediate audience with the Galactic Conquered. Silence fell over the hall. Even the Grith stopped chittering. Kale felt a chill run down his spine. Earth. After all this time. And not with a single ship or a timid message, but with 1,000 warships. On the main viewport, the stars seemed to shift. Not from movement, but from shadow. The human fleet emerged from the dark like a storm given shape. Their ships were unlike anything in conquered records, sleek, angular, and utterly black, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. No bright colors, no glowing emblems, just smooth lines and silent power. They formed a perfect grid, holding position just outside weapons range of Helios Prime. Not aggressive, not retreating, just there. Inside the lead vessel, the Aegis, Admiral Carol Hayes stood on the command deck. Her uniform was simple, dark gray with silver trim, and her eyes never left the main screen showing the station. Around her, officers moved with quiet efficiency. No shouting, no panic. They had trained for this moment for years. Captain Daniel Briggs stood to her right, arms crossed. He watched the Zenthar ships powering up their engines near the station's docking ring. "They're nervous," he said. "Good," Hayes replied. "Let them be." Dr. Lena Ortiz monitored the fleet's energy output from the science station. All systems were green. The slipstream drives had performed flawlessly. The shields were at standby. The weapons were locked but not armed. Everything was under control. Back on Helios Prime, confusion turned to fear. Some delegates demanded the station raise its defenses. Others insisted this was a trick, a simulation, or a rogue faction. But the sensor data didn't lie. The mass readings alone confirmed these were real warships, each one larger than most conquered cruisers. And there were 1,000 of them. Kale stepped forward, activating the station's reply channel. His voice trembled only slightly. "This is Envoy Kale Voss of the Varelian Conquered. Identify your fleet and state your intentions." Hayes's voice returned instantly. "We are the Earth Defense Fleet. We come in peace, but we do not come unprepared. We request formal recognition and a seat at the summit." A murmur ran through the hall. Recognition. Not as observers, not as petitioners, as equals. The Zenthar hegemony's lead envoy, General Torvak, slammed a clawed fist on the table. "This is an act of aggression. 1,000 warships do not arrive for peace talks. They arrive to threaten." Hayes's reply was calm. "And then consider this. If we wished to threaten, you would already be disabled. We chose to speak first. That is our intention." To prove it, she gave a quiet order. On the Aegis, Ortiz sent a single pulse, a low-power electromagnetic burst, targeted only at the 5 Zenthar cruisers hovering near the station. It wasn't a weapon. It was a demonstration. All 5 ships went dark at once. Lights flickered out. Engines shut down. Comms died. But their crews were unharmed. Life support remained active. It was a surgical strike, precise, non-lethal, and terrifying in its control. Gasps filled the hall. Torvak's scales turned pale with shock. Kale stared at the viewport where the Zenthar ships now floated like dead fish among the human fleet. Hayes spoke again. "We do not seek conflict, but we will not be ignored or disrespected. Grant us a seat and we will talk. Deny us and we will leave, but you will remember why." No one moved. No one argued. The message was clear. Earth had not come to beg. They had come to stand. Slowly, Kyle raised his hand. "The Conquered acknowledges Earth's request. A delegation will be granted immediate access to the summit chamber." A pause. Then Hayes's voice, softer now. "Thank you, Envoy Voss. We will send our representatives shortly." The channel closed. On the viewport, the human fleet held its formation. Silent. Still. Unshaken. Inside the Aegis, Briggs let out a slow breath. They listened. Ortiz nodded. "Now they'll have to learn." Hayes turned to her team. "Prepare the shuttle. And remember, no arrogance, no anger. We're here to join, not to conquer." As the small craft detached from the Aegis and glided toward Helios Prime, the galaxy watched. For the first time in 200 years, Earth was no longer a ghost. It was a presence. And presence changes everything. Delegates who had mocked humanity's absence now whispered in awe. Species that had written off Earth as extinct now scrambled to learn everything they could about human culture, history, and technology. The empty seat was uncovered. A new nameplate was brought out, simple blue with one word: Earth. The summit had just become far more interesting. HFY War. The shuttle from the Aegis docked smoothly at Helios Prime. No fanfare, no music, just the soft hiss of air equalizing and the clang of the ramp lowering. Out stepped 3 humans. They wore plain uniforms, dark gray with a small blue and silver emblem on the chest. No medals, no capes, no weapons visible. At the front was Admiral Carol Hayes, her posture straight but not stiff. Behind her walked Captain Daniel Briggs, his eyes scanning the corridor like a sailor checking the horizon. Beside him was Dr. Lena Ortiz, calm and focused, holding a simple data pad. Delegates lined the hallway watching in silence. Some stared with curiosity, others with suspicion. The Zenthar guard stood rigid, their claws resting near their sidearms, but they made no move. Cale Voss waited at the end of the hall, his expression unreadable. He had seen war. He had seen bluffs. But this felt different. These humans did not walk like invaders. They walked like people who had already won and simply came to collect what was owed. Cale stepped forward. "Welcome to Helios Prime," he said, his voice steady. "I am Envoy Cale Voss. The Conquered has agreed to hear your request." Hayes nodded. "Thank you. We appreciate the chance to speak." They were led to the main chamber, the same room where Earth's seat had sat empty for 200 years. Now a new chair stood there, plain but sturdy, placed evenly among the others. No special platform, no raised dais, just a seat at the table. That was all Earth had ever wanted. The chamber filled quickly. Every species sent at least one observer. Even the reclusive Krell sent a floating orb of light to record the event. Torvak of the Zenthar hegemony sat with his arms crossed, his tail twitching in irritation. He did not believe humans deserved to be here. But he also remembered how his ships had gone dark in an instant. He said nothing. Hayes stood at the center of the room. She did not raise her voice. She did not gesture dramatically. She simply spoke, clearly and without anger. "For 200 years we listened," she began. "We heard your debates, your treaties, your wars. We saw how the strong speak and the weak disappear. We saw promises made and broken before the ink dried. We chose silence not because we were afraid, but because we needed to be ready." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We are not here to take. We are not here to rule. We are here to stand as equals. Earth will join the Conquered, but only if we are treated as one. No tribute, no oversight, no second-class status. If you harm our people, our ships, or our worlds, we will respond." Not with words, with action. A murmur ran through the room. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, intrigued. Briggs stepped beside her. "We didn't build 1,000 warships to start a fight," he said. "We built them so we wouldn't have to," Ortiz added. "Our technology is ours. We will share what we choose when we choose. But we will not be forced to give up our secrets or our sovereignty." Kyle raised a hand. "What do you offer in return?" Hayes smiled slightly. "Stability, honesty, and strength you can count on if you earn it." She then shared limited data from their fleet: engine efficiency, shield harmonics, non-lethal weapon specs. Enough to prove their capabilities, but not enough to reveal how they worked. The Varelian scientist leaned in, eyes wide. The Krell orb pulsed with interest. Even Torvak uncrossed his arms, studying the readouts. Then came the real test. A delegate from the Merchant Guild of the Lyra system stood. "You speak of peace, but your arrival was a show of force. How do we know you won't turn on us tomorrow?" Hayes met his gaze. "Because we had every chance to strike today and we didn't. We could have blockaded this station. We could have jammed your comms. We could have demanded surrender. Instead, we asked for a seat. That is our promise." Before anyone could reply, alarms blared again, but this time it was different. A Zenthar cruiser, one of the 5 that had been disabled earlier, had rebooted its systems. Against orders, Its captain powered up weapons and moved toward the human fleet. Torvak's face darkened. "That is not my command," he growled. On the main screen, the rogue ship fired a warning shot, a plasma burst that streaked past the Aegis but close enough to rattle the station. Hayes didn't flinch. She tapped her comm. "Standby protocol shield." Back on the Aegis, Ortiz gave the order. The lead human ship released a wide-field pulse, not to destroy, but to protect. A shimmering dome of energy expanded outward, wrapping around Helios Prime and all nearby vessels. The next plasma shot from the Zenthar ship hit the shield and vanished, absorbed like rain into sand. Then, silently, 3 human destroyers peeled off from the main fleet. They moved fast, not with aggression, but with precision. Within seconds, they surrounded the rogue cruiser. Beams of soft blue light lanced out. Not weapons, but tractor fields and signal jammers. The Zenthar ship froze in place, engines dead, weapons locked. All of it happened in under 20 seconds. No explosions, no casualties, just control. Hayes turned back to the chamber. "We defend ourselves. We defend others if asked, but we do not seek war." Torvak stood slowly. His pride was wounded, but his mind was clear. "That ship acted without my order," he said. "The hegemony will discipline its captain." He looked at Hayes. "You showed restraint. That is honorable." Kale nodded. "Earth has proven its intent." The rest of the summit shifted. Talks that had dragged on for days were resolved in hours. Trade routes were discussed with new seriousness. Security pacts were reviewed with fresh eyes. Earth was no longer a rumor. It was a fact. As the session ended, Kyle approached Hayes. "You could have demanded more," he said quietly. She shook her head. "We only wanted respect. The rest we can earn." Outside the chamber, the human shuttle waited. The fleet still held position, silent and strong. But now they were not strangers. They were part of the conversation, and the galaxy would never ignore Earth again. Part 5. The days after the summit were quiet, but not empty. Helios Prime buzzed with a new kind of energy, not fear but curiosity. Delegates who had once ignored Earth now sought out the human delegation. Some asked about their ships. Others wanted to know how they built such strong shields. A few even asked simple questions like what humans ate or how they celebrated birthdays. Earth had gone from ghost to guest, and the change was felt everywhere. Admiral Carol Hayes met with Cale Voss daily. They walked the station's observation decks, talking not just about treaties but about history, art, and the kind of future they wanted for their people. Cale learned that humans valued stories, told around fires, written in books, shown in moving pictures. Hayes learned that Varelians measured time in star cycles and believed silence was a form of respect. They found more common ground than either expected. Captain Daniel Briggs worked with Concord engineers, sharing just enough technical knowledge to build trust without giving away secrets. He showed them how human ships used modular design, so one broken part could be swapped fast even in deep space. The Grith engineers who built everything as one solid piece were fascinated. They began sketching new ideas on the spot. Dr. Lena Ortiz gave a small lecture on slipstream physics. She didn't reveal how the drive worked, but she explained the basic principles. Folding space like cloth, not tearing it. The Krell orb hovered near her the whole time, recording every word. Later they sent a message. "Your science is elegant. We would like to collaborate." Even the Zenthar hegemony changed their tone. General Torvak invited Hayes to a formal dinner, a rare honor. He served roasted sky lizard, a Zenthar delicacy, and spoke of honor, duty, and the weight of command. Hayes brought earth bread baked fresh on the Aegis from wheat grown in orbital farms. Torvak tried it, chewed slowly, then nodded. "Strong, simple, honest, like your people." Back on Earth, news of the summit spread fast. Not through loud broadcasts, but through quiet channels. School lessons, news feeds, public screens, and city squares. Children watched clips of the human fleet holding position near Helios Prime. Farmers saw images of Hayes speaking calmly in the Concord chamber. Old men who remembered the resource wars wiped their eyes and said, "We made it." In the shipyards beyond Saturn, work did not stop. New patrol ships rolled off the lines, not for war but for presence. Earth would now guard its own trade routes. respond to distress calls, and stand watch near its colonies. The age of hiding was over. The age of responsibility had begun. The Concord officially welcomed Earth as a full member. No special rules, no extra taxes, just equal voice, equal vote, equal duty. Earth signed its first joint treaty, a pact to protect neutral shipping lanes from pirate clans that had grown bold in the outer systems. Within a week, 3 human frigates joined a mixed-species task force. They didn't lead. They didn't show off. They just did their part, and did it well. On the Aegis, Briggs stood on the bridge watching a cargo freighter from the Lyra system pass safely through a known danger zone. "Feels strange," he said to Ortiz, who was checking sensor logs. "Not hiding anymore," she smiled. "We're not hiding. We're standing." Hayes joined them, holding a simple cup of coffee, real beans grown in a greenhouse on Mars. "They're watching us," she said, "not to see if we'll fail, but to see if we'll stay true," and Earth did. Months passed. Trade ships from Earth began appearing at Concord ports, carrying food, medicine, and clean energy cells. In return, they brought alien seeds, rare minerals, and data crystals full of music and poetry from 100 worlds. Cultural exchanges started. Human artists displayed paintings on Varelian walls. Xanthar sculptors sent stone carvings to museums in Tokyo and Nairobi. A Krell learning pod even opened in Rio, teaching children how to think in patterns instead of words. But Earth did not forget its lessons. Its fleet remained strong. Patrols ran daily. Training continued. Not because they expected war, but because peace must be protected, not assumed. One evening, Cale visited the Aegis for the last time before returning home. He stood with Hayes on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "You could have taken power," he said. "With 1,000 ships, you could have demanded control." Hayes shook her head. "Power taken by force doesn't last. Power earned by trust does," Cale nodded. "Then trust you have." As his shuttle left the Aegis, the human fleet began to move, not away but into formation around Helios Prime, not as invaders, as partners. They would stay for a while, helping secure the station, sharing watch duties, learning the rhythms of galactic life. On Earth, night fell over the Pacific. Waves rolled onto clean beaches. In a small town in Oregon, a boy named Eli pointed to the sky. "Mom, is that one of ours?" he asked, spotting a distant light moving steady and bright. His mother smiled. "Yes, that's Earth." And across the galaxy, other children, Varelian, Xanthar, Grith, pointed to the same sky and whispered a new name. Earth. The silent planet had spoken. Not with anger, not with greed, but with strength, patience, and quiet pride. And the stars listened.